One of the disconcerting discoveries that man makes when he awakes to thought, when he begins to look around with a conscious eye, is the existence of contraries, dualities, everywhere, at every level of existence. And the mind is normally inclined to reject these dualities and withdraw to unity or oneness. But this is only an apparent solution, a failure of the soul. It is said that the only failures, only tragedies of this world are souls that fail to aspire. Every other kind of failure is a step towards an eventual success. Despite the stigma attached to Indian traditions, spiritual traditions, as being otherworldly, ascetic, rejecting the facts of life, there is much in that ancient heritage which affirms the reality of this life with all its contraries. One of the Upanishads even goes so far, one of the most ancient Upanishads, the Isha, goes so far as to say that it is through ignorance that we draw towards immortality. Those who choose only the knowledge draw into a greater darkness than the darkness of ignorance. Similarly, the succeeding verse says that it is only through the becoming that you can get at the being, not by rejecting the becoming, but passing through, comprehending the experience of the many, the becoming. You draw to the essential truths of oneness, of being. In his epic Savitri, Sri Aurobindo says, through nature's contraries, we draw nearer God. Duality forms the base of our life. But duality is a meaning. As long as there is no manifestation, it is unity, it is oneness. But the moment the divine consciousness or being turns towards manifestation, there has to be a polarity, two currents of being, two streams of conscious energies, but they are not different. It is the one that posits itself into two. In the tantric terminology, there is a supreme Parashiva. Shiva is the person, that white, pure, uninvolved person, divine person. He is called the Supreme Shiva. When he is moved to put out something of his own glory, the moment there is a thought, he becomes two. He becomes Shiva and he becomes Shakti. He becomes the presiding, the supporting consciousness and the active, dynamic, executive consciousness. In modern terms, we would say static and dynamic, or positive and negative. So wherever there is manifestation, wherever the one turns into the many, this principle of duality starts. Just as duality is the beginning of creation, duality also is the door through which we draw back. We arrive at the truth of our being, at the oneness that founds and bases. We discover that the many, the multiplicity, exists because it is ensouled by the one. And this one is not a mathematical one. If you total up the million units that people this universe, you do not arrive at that one being, one reality. It is an essential reality. It is an essential being who exists in everything, in the infinitesimal atom, as in the solar system. And everywhere he exists as a whole. It is not a fragmented consciousness that ensouls the forms. It is whole. Everywhere it is the whole. That is why it is said that that is full and this is full. The full is drawn from the full. Take out the full from the full and the full remains. It is not a logical full, a mathematical totality, but an essential, pervasive reality. And that is where the magic of the infinite is found to exceed the logic of the finite. With this background, you will better appreciate, as we develop the theme of man's approach to the divine through acceptance of life, acceptance of the work, activities as offerings, moments of consecration, moments of approach through the offering of energies at different levels to the master of sacrifice. As soon as one wakes up, gets awake and conscious, one discovers this apparent opposition between the divine truth and manifest creation. There is a constant duality. as I said, two poles of one being. The duality reveals itself in knowledge. What is duality? Contradiction in ignorance on the apparent surface reveals itself as we grow into light, to be but two poles of one being, two ends of one moment, both indispensable to each other. For instance, we become aware on one side of all this multiple creation, the currents and the cross currents of the various forces, currents of consciousness, currents of life is dynamism, and on the other, a self-existence, uninvolved, not lost in this moment. Even if all the universes that have been or that are going to be were abolished, that self, that existence remains like a pure sheet of water. It is not going to be affected. And this existence we experience as a consciousness. That consciousness also we can experience, and we are tempted to experience only as a sheer consciousness, without movement, something immobile, something self-existent, irrespective of all the movements around it. We also see an intrinsic force, not clothed in any form, but an impersonal force working at different levels. Now in the field of mind, now in the domain of life energies, now as material force. And there is also, we discover an uncaused bliss, a bliss, an ananda, that has a different character from the joy or the pleasure that flows from contacts, that flows from causes in life. There is an undercurrent, a streaming of bliss in the whole creation. The ancients say again and again that from bliss, from the delight of the eternal, all things are born. By that they are sustained. And in that bliss, they go in their passing from here. If there were not this ether of delight, who indeed could breathe? Who indeed could live? And it is because there is this delight, this bliss at the root of things, that man wants to live. Despite all the sufferings and pains, all the circumstances that repel, still he wants to live. What is at the back of this will to live is not the will to dominate, not the will to aggrandize oneself, but this impulse of delight to live, move, and pervade. This is at the root of things, irrespective of its expression in the universe. And we who are involved in this moment of time, where There is a past that is continuously receding, throwing up the present as the consequence of its the past that has gone, a present which is dead before it is born, and a future which is always coming. We always, if there is a level of being, there is a strata in our consciousness where all this time movement is felt to be superficial. There is a moment, there is a level where one is still. There is no movement. There one gets into the eternal. The eternal which pours itself through time. There is a perspective, a level of consciousness where all the past, the present and the future lie in a horizontal way, like a map spread out. And one can see. In the cosmos, there is a level in the etheric expanse called the Chit Akasha in Sanskrit, the etheric ocean, etheric sky, where all these things are mapped out. All that has taken place on this globe, in this universe, history or prehistory, not only what has taken place in physical action, but what has been felt, what has been thought, every possibility that tried to actualize itself, all those things have left an impress, have left some groove in that consciousness. And what is present is continuously impressing itself. And you will be amazed to know that what is going to happen, that also is in its seed form laid out. How? Because what takes place on earth, in the physical plane, has already been achieved in principle, worked out in principle on the subtle physical plane as a possibility, not as a certainty. The earth alone is the field of certainty. On every other plane, there is this flow of possibilities. So each thing before it is actualized clashes on the realm of possibilities with other possibilities. And a few possibilities are projected in the earth atmosphere, with the dominant possibility supported. All those things are imaged, mapped out. That is what Sri Aurobindo calls the memory of the future. There is something which has that memory. And everyone who is open in his consciousness by practice or by gift at birth, who can perceive and sense that alone can predict the future. It is possible for us to read the past with perfect accuracy to the letter. Till this moment, at 10:20, what has happened? There are persons who will come and tell you without having met you at all before. But what will happen at 2 o'clock today, they can't say. Because there is still the possible, not the actual. What is likely to happen, you can, if you have that intuitive insight, you may anticipate. But you cannot definitely say that this is going to happen. Particularly the time element, you cannot determine, because each plane of existence has its own time and has its own space. What happens there looks as if it has been achieved, accomplished. In earthly time, it may take a longer duration. I wonder if I narrated that incident, and supposing I have, since there are some new friends here, it is worthwhile repeating. It was in 1920, when India was in the throes of political agitation and movement, when nobody could conceive of India being freed from the British, and the political leadership was unsure of itself, that when the mother, my teacher, she was meditating with Sri Aurobindo, she suddenly opened her eyes and said, India is free. Now, he asked her, how? Was there violence? She said, no. I saw them leaving as they came. As the British came, they left. Historical circumstances made it impossible for them to continue. This took place in 1920, and she says she saw it achieved, fixed in the earth consciousness. But still it took 27 years more for the event to materialize. And she illustrated this to explain how, in the transition from one plane to another, there is this passage of time. Time of one plane rendering itself into time of another plane. So this time, even like space, they are different from each other. And there is something which holds back, which is eternal. But that eternal can be experienced and realized even in our consciousness, even now. Because essentially we are one with it. In each one of us, there is an element, a spark of God, a spark of a divine consciousness, which shares the characteristics of infinity, of eternity, with the Supreme. And it is when some ray of that light, that soul consciousness, touches you on the surface, that you have a sense of liberation. That you don't feel confined any longer in physical space. Things that happen have a very relative value for you. And you live in a kind of permanence, a permanent state which is not affected. To achieve this state of permanence in the being, at the core of oneself, is the sole objective of some of the yogic paths in the East. But for us, that should be the beginning to realize in ourselves this eternity, this possibility of infinity is a liberating experience, laying a foundation for the future manifestation of the divine consciousness. This is one side. The awakened soul feels all these here. And apparently the world, the universal movement. But if you observe carefully, if you analyze objectively, you find it is this time spirit, this spiritus time, that carries all these things on its stream. As time, it carries everything. As space, it holds everything. But it is that. There is no real contradiction. The world exists because the spirit is there. The world cannot exist by itself. It is in that sense that some of the philosophers have said, the world doesn't have any existence of its own. That is what our understanding of the world as an independent entity is wrong. But the world as an expression, as something that is upheld, projected and upheld by the spirit, is as true, as real as the spirit itself. And what is spirit? Spirit is the essence of things. The core substance of a thing is the spirit. The spirit has also a very, very subtle substance of its own, because all the grades and layers of substance are the concretizations, the congealments of the spirit. So, substance and spirit reveal themselves to be again two ends of the same reality. So we find that despite the appearances of mutual exclusion, it is the time that holds all things on its stream that flows. It is the space that contains all, and it is the spirit that functions as the substance of all that exists. And compared to this basic substratum, this universe, in the experience of many explorers of consciousness, has been that it is transient, limited, and shot through and through by suffering. That's why they say it is all Maya. Maya means, in their terminology, an illusion. You go in, pass through a desert, there is a burning sun, not a drop of water, and suddenly you see a beautiful green valley with a stream flowing. They have that oasis. And when you go near it, it disappears. Now this analogy is cited by the philosophers to say that it is an illusion. The world is an illusion. But I would say the world is not an illusion. Our understanding of it, our limited reading of it is an illusion. The moment we understand exactly what it is, where is the illusion? They cite the example of the rope and the snake. There is a rope. The philosophers point out There is a rope, a man is going in the dark, he stumbles across the rope and he flies back in horror that there is a snake, there is a serpent. The earth world is like that. The opponents, the opposing philosophers, they point out with reason that very well, but the rope is a fact. You have mistaken the rope for a serpent, but the rope continues. It is not that the rope is not there. So, what you think it is there, it is not there. So, your understanding of the world is not correct, but the world is there. The serpentness is not there, but the rope is there. So, the world exists. So, these are endless debates which make no meaning except in, academic halls and debates. But for those who are engaged in the pursuit of these truths, expressing something of it in their lives, these are dry, intellectual controversies which appear a sheer waste of time. Because what matters is what we experience. That is why Buddha refused to answer all these questions. Whether the world is real, how did the world come to be, whether there is a God, whether the God, it is the domain where you go is a world of bliss. He refused to answer. He said, when you are hurt, a thorn has got into your foot. What do? Do you start reasoning and arguing from which tree this thorn must have come? What kind of tree that must be? Does that tree really exist? Or do you concern yourself with removing that thorn? Well, first remove the cause of suffering, and then everything will come by itself. So let us concern ourselves with the immediates, not the philosophical problems. Well, these are by the way, because we see a plethora of books, lectures, reports, arguing on purely mental basis, which have nothing to do with the realities of the spirit, creating artificial barriers and separative walls between different formulations of thought and experience, forgetting that experience can be multiple. Experience can be of many kinds. We cannot bind the divine, saying that we shall be experienced only in this way. My capacity, my mold may be such that it will admit only one kind of unity, one kind of approach, and one kind of union with the divine. But I should recognize that there are others. The beauty of this creation, the beauty of manifestation is precisely this, that the multiple truth of God, the multiple truth of the divine reality, instead of being contained in one, it is being brought out into the many, the multiplicity. So one has to pass through multiplicity before one can fruitfully arrive at unity. It is through death that one comes to immortality. When one understands this truth, death becomes a passage for greater life. Death is a process of life. Life is not a process of death. Life is not an interregnum, a little period between deaths. Death is a process of life. And the texts say that through death one arrives at immortality. Death means this multiplicity, experience of division, experience of separation. Only when you are separated can you really appreciate and enjoy the unity that you recover. In a sense, the joy of manifestation, the play of manifestation is precisely this, to recover the oneness. Sri Aurobindo says that this universe is an eternal garden with God and nature as the boy and the girl playing hide and seek. And that is what it is. Nature and soul, God and man, they are playing hide and seek. I take longer to discover, another takes a swift route. But it is the divine that is recovering itself through its forms. The mysterious play in which the protagonist pursues himself through forms. That's the character of this universe. And when this duality of the universe and the spirit, the world and God strikes us, it is this deeper truth of it that we have to recover, that we have to arrive at, and not just dismiss it as a product of Maya, a power of falsehood or cunning. Actually, a dispassionate and an objective search reveals Brahman, this reality, with this face of Maya. Maya is a power of self-deployment. Self-deployment by which the infinite pours himself into any number of finites. This power of finitizing what is the infinite was called in the ancient terminology the power with a certain cunning. And this quality of cunning acquired the character of power of falsehood or illusion. Later on, as the philosophical intellect developed, the earlier one was an intuitive perception. And they said, the seers discovered the self-power of God, lost in the modes of its own work, hidden in the modes of its own working, in their contemplation. One has to be a seer. One has to be used to contemplation before one can discover that this nature force, this executive energy, is really the self-power of God, Devatma Shaktim. God as power, lost in the modes of its working. That is why we see that there is a somnambulist character to the workings of this force. We say it is an inconscient force, it is an unconscious force, mechanical force. But the results that this mechanical force brings out betoken the presence of a universal, constant intelligence. Today, the scientists approaching from the other end stand face to face with an intelligence behind the workings of nature. The seers of the Upanishad says, this world has wisdom for its eye. Prajna netroyam lokaha. This world is not a mechanical world. It is led, it is guided by an eye of wisdom. That was said at least 5,000 years ago. And starting from the other end, science confirms what spirituality has glimpsed, experienced, and recorded in its own language. As science develops, science will discover itself to be only a mode of the working of the same consciousness, which expresses itself at one level and from one end as spirituality, and at the other as science. Science and art After all, what are they? They are formulations of one consciousness, movements of consciousness to bring out certain values, certain truths at different levels. There is a physical science, there is a vital science, there is a mental science which you call psychology, there is a science of the soul, there is a spiritual science, and there is a science of the superconscious. You talk of the science of the subconscious. Modern psychology is too much obsessed with the subconscious, an unhealthy preoccupation with things that are not even properly formulated. And they want to trace every little movement that takes place to subconscious, to the subconscious or the unconscious. So far they have not yet arrived, I believe, at the level of the inconscient or the nations, which spirituality posits. And it has the boldness and the courage to say that this nations, this inconscience, is only the mask of the superconscious. Sri Aurobindo says in Savitri, the cold worker, the supreme worker, works under a cold, a dark cloak, so that he may work undisturbed. And having found a little clue that there are origins of our movements in our subconscious regions, there is a tendency to trace the whole of life movements to the subconscious. Actually, the subconscious loses its hold as man becomes more and more conscious. The subconscious only is a little fragment. Behind our surface, there is the entire subliminal. A subliminal consciousness which is freed from the physical limitations, which opens and overflows into the universal consciousness around it, what may be called the intraconscious. And this subliminal has, at its lower end, sinks into three levels. The subconscious, that means of which we are semi-conscious, unconscious, of which we are not conscious at all, and the inconscient, that is where there is not a speck of apparent consciousness. The unconscious is conscious in its own way. The subconscious also is conscious in its own way, only not according to the, what I may say, the wavelength to which we are used. Above, it is the spiritual consciousness, the superconscious consciousness. And around, there is a circumconscious. Now, all these realms of consciousness have still to be tapped in terms of science, modern science. Though the occultists and spiritualists have spoken of it in diverse terms and different languages, they are still to be scrutinized, explored by psychology, modern psychology. From that point of view, modern psychology is still on the threshold of consciousness, of its possible study of consciousness. It is in this country that there has been a breakthrough. In certain areas, the frontiers of science have broken. And you have gone, psychology has liberated itself from its classic bounds and overflowed into what they call parapsychology, and the terminology changes. And they are forced to recognize that there is an element which is not mental, which does not fit in with the conception of or modern psychology. But there is something different, higher. And they are conducting experiments. They are forced to recognize the phenomena of telekinesis, telepathy. And also how the physical can be a real barrier instead of a link. The physical, in certain circumstances, can be a barrier and prevent a mutual communion. Words can be liars. Words can misinterpret. Words can act as obstructions. If I know how to communicate with you, deal with you on the level of thought without having to speak, I can surely establish a better relation, identity with you, than through the medium of language. Language had been designed to meet certain human needs at particular levels. But when the human consciousness is exceeding its recognized limits, language also has to grow. Language has to keep pace with the development. And English is the only language on earth today which has shown that capacity. Instead of being purist, instead of having its destiny to be decided by an academic in an academy like French, French language had that possibility up to one time. But now it is fast becoming a limited classic language. One day it will be like Latin and Sanskrit. Has shown amazing capacity and vitality to be a world language, expressing any conception, any experience, combining, keeping its windows open to winds of change from every level and nook of the world. That is a sign of the growth of consciousness as far as the languages is concerned. Psychology has been growing, language has been growing, human perspective and vision is growing, old limitations are breaking down. We are truly on the verge of momentous times. If we still limit ourselves, if we still limit ourselves to one creed, one religion, one scripture, we are atavistic forces. We become atavistic forces. There can be nothing as final in the realm of knowledge. There can be nothing final in the realm of consciousness. It is something infinite that is unrolling itself. Every moment, every second of time, new elements are being put into manifestation. New souls are coming into existence, are released like 1,000 sparks from a central fire, as to quote the Upanishads. They are being released. New vibrations, new truths that are gathered, that have been waiting down the ages for expression, they are coming. New possibilities are being pushed by the Supreme Spirit. New knowledge is growing and building. So nobody's knowledge, no teaching can say that it contains everything, that it is the final thing. We have to grow. If we don't grow with this growing, developing world spirit, we stagnate, stultify, and we die. The moment a person or a movement says, I have everything that I need, that is the beginning of the end. It can never, nothing can be self-sufficient. Nothing is intended to be self-sufficient. We spoke on the question of sacrifice the other day, how nature compels, whether you are aware of it or not, a certain interchange. In the very act of breathing, you interchange. You take in something from others and you give something of your own good or bad to others. And there is This flow, interpenetration at every level. Where are you going to draw the line and build the walls and say, I don't need anything from elsewhere? You can do that only when you strike that depth and arrive at union with the divine source of things. And when you do that, this conception of myself and others, this and that, falls altogether. You feel everything as one. There is nothing other. There is one solidarity in the universe. And this is demanded of us. Everyone who believes in spiritual life, consciousness, development and approach towards the divine reality, a meaningful existence, has to capture this time spirit. Everything, all the lids and the barriers have been broken and grow into the new age, and according to the sincerity with which we commit ourselves, translate our faith into action. The new world, the new age will emerge earlier. Perhaps, as the occultists have foreseen, around 2000 AD. I think we'll break now. For the 2 or 3 talks that are left for me, I would like this hour after the break to be turned into a question hour so that we could have a kind of a dialogue. I could know your minds and you could know something of mine, and it will be more stimulating. Number of friends asked me questions after the class individually, but I thought all could share in that cross-fertilization. And you can start.
Yes, the question I wanted to ask was, we hear a lot of talk. On one hand, the occultists say there's a new age, an Aquarian age, and on the other hand, traditionally this is called the Kali Yuga, the age steeped in materialism and that, and that will eventually end in destruction due to that materialism. Could you speak on the relation between
Yes, yes. Now, I have done a good deal of reading of these epics, scriptures in original Sanskrit, not so much for my own edification as a focus for spending time with my older sister who doesn't know a word of English, and to keep company with her. You know, I would read out 100 verses in Sanskrit, translate them in my own mother tongue and explain to her every day. It went on for years together. So it was there in those scriptures and epics like Mahabharata, Ramayana, Bhagavat and all these, that they say that this Kali Yuga, the age of iron, they say the age of gold, the age of silver, the age of bronze, the age of iron, all symbolic. Gold represents truth. Silver represents purity. Bronze represents strength. Iron represents strength plus a certain obscurity. Now they said they have always certain chapters on the science of the approach of the climax of this iron age. And they said the religion, truth, everything is separately formulated for those who live in the iron age, because their stature will be less. Now even physical stature, they say it will be less in the iron age than the people in the earlier ages. Their mental capacities to grasp largely will be affected. They may concentrate, specialization, that is the speciality of our age. But this specialization has led to a fragmentation of knowledge. Men have come to know more and more of certain things and less of many things. So this has led to compartmentalization of life, fragmentation of knowledge. And that is why there is a roundabout turn now. Stress on holism, stress on totality, stress on integralism. Now in those scriptures, it has been said that one of the signs will be men will dress like women and women will dress like men. Men will start keeping long hairs and women will start, cutting their hairs very briefly. And that many of those things we have been seeing happening, how labor, workmen, they will occupy the seats of power. And those who are full of knowledge, those who are open to light, they will find themselves cornered, forced to take occupations for which they are not really fit. The learning will no more be honored, but only wealth, naked military might, that will be respected. All that they have said. And there is also a saying that 2500 years after the death of Buddha, the passing of Buddha, will signalize the end of this iron age. From all accounts, the age has ended. The iron age has ended. And the new age has not yet come. We are in a period of transition. I have been always harping upon a theme that whether in the Christian or the Indian theology, scriptures, there is always reference to periodical deluges. End of a cycle culminates in a flood, conflagration. Everything is wiped out. There is a Noah's Ark, one fish escapes, and all kinds of things. And new age starts thereafter. So there are a number of people who are confidently anticipating a mighty destruction, a mighty deluge, and they are trying to find places of safety, thinking that the physical destruction is going to come. Just as there was an alarm about San Francisco and earthquake. In India also, in 1962, they had confidently predicted that certain areas of India will be sunk, and people started selling their properties and moving into the interior. And panic, it is panic. One person does it, it catches fire, goes on. But actually, in my perception, the end of the age is not signalized by physical destruction. The civilization that is ending has been a mind-built civilization. And the deluge is going to be a deluge of mental values, institutions based upon those mental values. And that deluge, what we call pralaya in Sanskrit, is on for the last 1 decade and more. That is why we see many of the old ideals, ideologies, institutions all crumbling. Family, marriage, and this political ideologies of the old type, systems of education, systems of health, medicine, everything, all things are breaking down. And there is an appearance of a certain anarchy. Now this is real, the deluge is already on. The end of our civilization is being signalized by the end of our mental supports, because ours has been a mental civilization. We are not going to have physical conflagrations, physical floods, physical earthquakes, physical conflagrations of fires and so on. All that has been done at a mental level, because man is today a mental being, creating a mental civilization and creating a mental basis for the next age. All that is good, all that is lasting in the contribution of man, the mental being, has been established. If we stay longer on this mental level, we stagnate, we ossify. So all those values, institutions based upon values which are no longer relevant, they are being struck down everywhere, all over the world. And many of us lament, but there is nothing really to lament. We have really to rejoice that old things, things which will hold us back, are going without a special effort on our part. We should catch up with the new things. So the new age has started, but we are in a transitional stage when many of us have a bit of regret. You know, the old usual regret of the ego at having to give up what it has been long accustomed to. And there are certain ills that are multiplying. As I have been seeing in this country, the old people, it is inhuman to put them in one place, you know. And it is one of the tragedies of modern times. When people when they become old have to feel unwanted, when they have contributed what they have got to the society, to the family, they are to be put in separate homes as inmates of certain old homes. That is one of the most deplorable features of the civilization in the West. It is unthinkable that these things can happen in the East, where there is still that filial affection. Each one of us remembers that we are here today because our father and mother did certain things, underwent certain sufferings, made certain sacrifices for us. And the least that we can do is to see that they are there, looked after by us. And their wisdom, their maturity, they are kept available for us. So it is a cycle. I, in my turn, when I become old, I expect my children to look after me. So this, a certain interchange and dependence, that being arbitrarily cut across, this is one of the tragedies of modern times, but these tragedies will become things of the past when the new consciousness comes and swipes away all these ills. There will be a revolution in consciousness. Unless we evolve, we effect an evolution in ourselves consciously, choosing it of our own accord, we will be swept away by different revolutions. And the new age is, seeds are being thrown, where each one is capturing them, holding them, expressing them in his own way. But what is important is there is a dissolvent process at work. And they say New Age communities, they are started. I have heard many old people saying that all these old New Age communities, they are all temporary affairs. They are here today, tomorrow they die. But it is good. They make an experiment, and when something is lacking, they die. It is good that they die, because something new, like phoenix, springs from their ashes. The New Age movement is continuous. The New Age communities may die. It is something, men die, that man may be reborn, and God manifest. So there will be a number of failures. There will be a number of such half-hearted attempts, each convicted by its own imperfection and limitation. There will have to be 100 experiments before some new pattern, a new alternate, what they call lifestyle in this country, that really emerges. In his study, Human Cycle, Sri Aurobindo, which he wrote about 50, 60 years ago, tracing the development of man right from the primitive stage when he was forced to choose a mate and then build a family. The family developed into a clan and a tribe until it has developed. He says how through different stages it has gone through. And today it is on a verge of exceeding the nation unit, of exceeding the mental age, the age of the intellect, the age of the individual. It is at present fumbling in a subjective age, where everybody is feeling for the secret of life, for the springs of life. Whether it is Toynbee, whether it is another person, they are all fumbling. What is the secret of life? Why have these 21 civilizations come up? And why have they failed? Challenge and response is a very facile way. But why do they fail? Challenges are there everywhere, individual, collective. But why failure? Toynbee has not been able to say, why is the failure? Failure because you are unable to progress with the time. You are unable by your own limitation, social, individual limitation, individual and collective limitation, to go beyond a certain length. And Sri Aurobindo confidently expects that this subjective age is slowly precipitating itself into a spiritual age, when persons, thinkers, seers, leaders of society will tend to approach the soul level, find the origins of this evolutionary movement at the level of the soul. And from there, then they will have that true unity, true sense. But till then, he says, there will be a plethora of movements, each one claiming to be the Messiah, each one claiming to give the solution. And he says the very existence of these pseudo societies, pseudo leaders, pseudo messiahs will be a sign that there will be a ferment in society refusing to accept what is there, searching for things. A few adventurers, a few other unprincipled people may take advantage, but they will be exposed. But what is fact is that the movement is on. And we are all in the process. Nobody has got a complete truth. Again, to come to the same point, everybody has got something of the truth. All so many partial truths have to combine, synthesize, and some figure of a complete truth will begin to emerge. East, west, young and old, these are all parts. And there is a universal soul that is slowly emerging. Despite all contraries, you may say that there are wars, the battles, customs cordons and all that. But these are all the dying outbursts of a thing that is old and decadent. In the new age, there will be really this universal soul will acquire a universal character of language, attitudes, thought, feeling, exceed denominational religions, emphasize on one truth being the source of life, one rule of harmony. But this unity will not be a uniformity. There will be plentiful variation. Each nation will present its own strain of consciousness in the total perspective. A nation, whether it is small or large, its prestige, its character will depend upon what it contributes. The age of military preponderance determining the influence of a nation are fast going. What you are really contributing meaningfully for the growth of human consciousness, it is there that the seeds of progress lie. From that point of view, again to come to this point, Europe has served its purpose. There is a law in the evolution of humanity that each nation, each people are assigned or given a particular value, a particular truth to express, form, establish and contribute. Once that is done, that nation lives on its past. Ancient Greece developed certain, the idea of physical aesthesis, beauty, rhythm, logic, intellect, contributed. And throughout the Western civilization, those values are permanently enshrined. But where is Greece today? Similarly, certain Mediterranean countries like Egypt, others, they contributed in the occult development. Rome, it developed the truth of organization of empires, military strength. It was the first great empire of that kind. And China, it contributed the ethical strain, morality. Confucianism is what is it? More than God, it is morality. India was given the development of spiritual values. Now, it is also a law that once a nation contributes what it has got to give over the centuries, it tends to live in its past. Always my past glories. We in India have an unending problem of trying to refrain people from always speaking of the glory that was past, the glory that was in. See, when a people or a society starts speaking of their past, they have forfeited their future. Now, what nations do and should do, what people should do, as individuals should do, once an objective is fulfilled, they have to renew their existence, they have to renew their innings by taking a higher or another objective. Renew your life by adding a new interest. The art of not getting old, the art of remaining young, even for us individually, is to always develop new interests. When the old interests no longer suffice, new interests have to be developed. So also among the nations. Each nation has to develop. Now, as far as Europe is concerned, except Russia, all the other nations are exhausted. And they have ceased so far to contribute meaningfully towards the future. Africa is still to be developed. We in Asia are still caught up making up the leeway in our economic conditions, and it will take a long time for us to make up what we have lost from the economic and the material level. It is here in this continent, in America, that this new movement, new age, new consciousness is steadily forming. There is a group of people at different levels ready to receive, abandon the past, forsake all the old attachments. They have no fanatical loyalties anywhere. They do not have the karmic load of the past. It is a young society. And that is what enthuses people like me to come again and again to this land, renew our enthusiasm, renew our loyalty to the new ideal, see the possibilities actualizing themselves, restrain our cynicism, and see if we can serve in some way. So the new age has started here. It will take full expression here. Long ago, Mother said, though she did not know much of all these, continental dimensions and all that, I have an impression, she said, that the new thing will start somewhere there. And it is happening. So you are all the custodians and you have got all the responsibilities to build up meaningfully. And each one has to turn a new leaf. Each one has to start expressing some new idea and a new truth every day. That is how you can contribute to the evolution of a new society in this country. Have I answered your question?
We were speaking of something a few minutes ago about the assimilation of high energy. What methods or means can you suggest
Yes.
for the utilization of that energy?
Yes. It is a constant feature of people trying to evolve into something new, develop a new approach, live a new life, who open themselves to new spiritual influences, who open to what are called, to use the language of this country, is new energies, flow of energies. They have constantly, many of them complain of headaches, sicknesses, and wonder why they were quite healthy before, for trying to do something good and develop, why do they suffer? Now it has been my experience over the last 40 years of my quest, my experience and observation also, that when new energies, new knowledge, new experience, new consciousness starts flowing into you, either from above or wells out from within or presses on you from around, there are some parts of our nature which are used to the old rhythm, and they lag behind. They refuse, to open themselves and absorb what comes. It may be in the form of old ideas, old ways of reaction, old pulls, whatever it is. There is a certain unseen resistance obstructing the reception and the assimilation of the new consciousness or the new energies. And when there is this obstruction, frequently it reflects itself in the form of a high load on the head, which translates itself into a point of pounding, headache. At times there is itching in the body, at times there is fever, at times fever which is not registered on the thermometer. That also happens. And upsets of the digestion or whatever it is. Now these physical disorders are only consequences of the slowness of the being, nature, to assimilate what is offered to it, or certain elements which need to be weeded out before assimilation can be possible and assured. And how to do it is to ask ourselves, what are we seeking for? This is the truth, this is the ideal, and this is what I want. What is there in me that is inconsistent with it, that acts as a damper, that holds me back? There is plenty in each person, in the ego, in the nether parts, in the subconscious. Nobody can say everything is open. To be entirely open is the end product of a process and never a beginning. Because each one of us carries not just the last 30 or 40 years, but the impressions, what are called the samskaras, of countless births. All those sediments of nature, they are there, having created molds and grooves in which the consciousness tends to flow. When it reacts, it tends to flow through the old channels. It is a relentless observation and struggle to correct, to change the rails, to form new grooves, to create new habits, replacing old habits, to transmute one's old nature into a new nature. It is a hard discipline, a strenuous homework, which involves a 24-hour effort. And that is why we say all life is yoga.
I wanted to ask two questions related to something you were talking about. One that differentiate between the unity that's attained through pursuit of the yoga of knowledge and the union in bliss that's attained through the pursuit of the yoga of love. I was trying to understand the difference in that. Unity would imply a oneness, and union would imply a joining together of two things that had been separate. So it sounds like you're saying that the yoga of knowledge leads to more of a unity, and the yoga of love leads more to maintenance of some separateness of seeker from the divine.
Yoga of knowledge, the path of knowledge, pursued exclusively without the element of devotion, leads to a certain oneness or identity in peace. There is a silence and a peace and an understanding which culminates in unity. There is no feeling. One lives in a kind of nirvana of outer existence. When the element of devotion, love, which is the characteristic force of the path of love, is either added to it or conjoined, that unity bursts into an eternal identity in bliss. Bliss supported, founded on peace. Both are there. The peace is there at the back and the bliss. Path of love pursued exclusively leads only to this bliss and delight. Path of knowledge leads to that only peace devoid of bliss. So we have to integrate both. And each one pursued in its right spirit joins the other paths. In the conception, all the three paths, works, knowledge, love, they are to be integrated in the human being so that the unity is integral, is comprehensive, and it captures, breathes all the elements of will, heart and mind. Am I clear? Not perhaps.
I'm still not quite clear.
I think the clarity will come by experience. The Middle East, particularly the congeries of tribes, we started what we call Israel and the other small Mediterranean countries. They contributed more to the development of the occult knowledge. You know what we have treasured in the Tarot, the Kabbalah, and outwardly it was religious. But their essential contribution is in the occult side of things, gaining control and direction of the forces of nature. Mysteries, they are called the mysteries, the small islands near Greece, near those lakes. They specialized. We have lost many of the traces. We are slowly recovering many. Crete, island of Crete, all of them built a huge system of knowledge, but essentially occult. But it is also a law. When a knowledge or a strain becomes unbalanced, it is destroyed. Atlantis, Lemuria, they built a lopsided occult civilization, bereft of a spiritual consciousness. So they had to go. Of course, the cream or the substance of the occult contribution has been there, absorbed. But for us, we have to combine spiritual consciousness with occult knowledge. Now, occult knowledge does not mean black magic. Occult knowledge really is knowledge of the principles and processes of nature which are not visible to the naked eye. Rain, sun, storms, all these, they are operations of nature. Now each thing has a number of causes behind which has led to that phenomenon. Now occultism gives you a peep, develops a faculty in you by which you can draw to the source of these things and exercise a control. When it is exercised for favor, for the good of humanity, it is called white magic. When it is exercised for evil, it is called black magic. The seers, the saints and the sages, they don't have to develop this occult knowledge. It just becomes available to them. And they do their best always in preventing calamities, in preventing floods. If we have 10 floods, there are at least 50 floods which have been prevented by these personalities or persons who have that knowledge. But occult knowledge without a spiritual consciousness is dangerous. Spiritual consciousness alone without this power is likely to be impotent for purposes of the world. So both have to be combined in a happy balance. I think it's 11:45, is that right? Yes.